Abby. I'm with LDV Capital. We invest in people building visual technology businesses. We thrive on collaborating with deep technical teams that leverage computer vision, machine learning, and artificial intelligence in order to analyze visual data. Thanks so much for tuning into our series, The Women Leading Visual Tech. The purpose of our series is to highlight some of the top ladies whose work in visual technologies are revolutionizing business and society. In this interview, I had the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Kavita Bala. She's an esteemed computer vision researcher, entrepreneur, and leader in the computer science space. Her research expertise lies in the area of computer vision and computer graphics using deep learning. Some of her work on cloud rendering is the core production engine in Autodesk's cloud renderer. She served as the chair of the Department of Computer Science at Cornell University from 2018 through to 2020, and now she's been appointed Dean of the Faculty of Computing and Information Science. Dean Bala also co-founded Grokstyle. Grokstyle is a computer graphics search company that won our 2016 LDV Vision Summit's Entrepreneurial Computer Vision Challenge. Recently, Grokstyle was acquired by Facebook. In 2019, she was elected as an ACM Fellow for contributions for rendering and scene understanding. And this year, she received an ACM SIGGRAPH Computer Graphics Achievement Award. We'll discuss her career path, current projects, and so much more. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Dr. Bala just as much as I did. And please let us know what you think. Enjoy. So Kavita, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm really excited to have you on to talk all about visual tech.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me, and it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. So I guess we'll kind of just start out with right from the beginning. When you were growing up, what did you answer someone when they asked you what you wanted to be?
So that's an interesting question. I actually had a lot of interests. So I was an Indian, I had learned Indian classical dance for a long time, to the point where I thought that might be a career path for me. I really loved math.
You're going to be a Bhangra dancer?
No, actually, Bhangra is a folk dance, so we used to compete in Bhangra competitions. It's actually Bharatnatyam is the sort of the classical traditional dance, and that's the one that I had learned for something like 13 years, and then I sort of had to decide between sort of a more academic path or a more performance art path, and I decided the academic path. But yeah, so I also had interest. I mean, so I love math, so that was always one piece, and that's effectively what my career drove me into. But I also like law and social issues, so I had very, very wide interests when I was younger, and I had I did different activities where I really had sort of these points in my life where I had to make important decisions as to which direction I would go. For dance versus, for performance art versus math, at some point, I was doing really well academically, and I thought I saw that as a longer term path, and I went there. But then, when I got into 11th grade, and the way the Indian schooling system works, you have to choose between different areas that you're going to focus on relatively early. And I had to choose between biology and sort of this computer science path, which is relatively new at that time. And that time, taking the biology track required dissecting a frog, which I knew I just had no interest in doing. So that made me take computer science courses, and then I fell in love with computer science, and that basically determined my life's trajectory.
That's fantastic. And what about your parents at that point in time? Were they like, you're crazy? Like, what is computer science? Like, why would you go down this path?
That's actually, that's a great question. My brother was an electrical engineer, and and that was sort of computer science was quite new, but electrical engineering had been around for a long time. He was an but they were not as out of the loop because of him. So they knew about this up and coming field. And so they were pretty open to that. But it didn't. Yeah, and when I went to my undergraduate, which was this Indian Institute of Technology, I was the only woman in my class. So it was a little crazy in computer science then to be a woman in the field. But yeah, my parents were incredibly supportive. And actually, even my classmates were incredibly supportive. They're still close friends of mine.
That's great. How many men were there versus you? Like, what was the ratio? 1 to 200, 1 to 300?
No, so the way it worked, this is called IIT. I was in IIT Bombay. There are like hundreds of thousands of students take this exam, and you have to be in the top 150 to get into computer science.
Wow.
So that was what, so we were this cohort in that, and then we split up in different parts of the country. So some of us, about 40 of us were in Bombay, 40 in Delhi, 40, in the different institutes. So that was, it was something else, but it was a huge bonding experience too. That class, I mean, we're still friends. So, you know, how many ever years later, it's nearly 30 years later, we still, you know, there's a WhatsApp group, we all hang out,
That's
talk to
great.
each other.
It's fantastic that, you know, it is one of the amazing things about technology is how it allows you to stay connected to all of these people throughout your life, even though, you know, you may be hundreds of thousands of miles away from each other, which is spectacular. So do you have a piece of advice that you give to girls all over the world who are getting into a male-dominated industry like computer science was, you know, when they are that 1 out of 150 who've been accepted to a cohort?
Yeah, it was tough. It remains tough. And one thing I'll say, you know, and I think things have improved, but there's a long, long way to go before we get to the point. So I'll just say at Cornell now, so I was this is the IIT where I was as an undergraduate. Then I went to MIT for my PhD. And I remember when I arrived at MIT, I had a study group with 3 women, and they were bemoaning how few women they were. And I was like, well, there's more than one. This is great. This is like the first time I've been in
It's exciting. There's 3 of us.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, now at Cornell, we have our undergraduate population is 36% women. So I've been a faculty mentor for the Women in Computing group at Cornell. And so we've come a long way from where we were, but actually that's at the undergraduate level. We need to continue to increase the pipeline at the graduate level, at the PhD and the faculty level. So we're making progress, but there's a lot more to do. So getting back to your question of, you know, what's the advice? I think, you know, it's tough. I remember one of the things that I use, I'm a very, you know, anybody who knows me knows I talk, you know, very openly, and I'm very gregarious. And at that time, I would not say anything. And the reason is if you're the only woman in the class, if you say something that's not brilliant, right? If it doesn't even need to be dumb, but if it's not brilliant, then people kind of remember that you didn't ask a great question or anything like that. So I used to not ask questions in class, for example, which was terrible. So I guess what I learned over time though is find your comfort zone, and it's still, you still have to be comfortable with who you are, and you know, do engage to the level that you're comfortable with, but maybe push a little beyond your comfort zone, and you know, just a little bit, at least bit by bit, till you get there. And this is probably advice that's good for men and women alike, is, you know, just work up to where, you know, you feel like you're comfortable and being part of the whole process. But I'll say
that because I was talking with Dr. Timnit Gebru on one of like the previous Women Leading Visual Tech series. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about there was how when she was younger, and I felt a lot the same way, you'd always talk up in class and you'd always give things. And all of a sudden you got to the university level and it became much more precarious or dangerous or something to speak up for some reason. Like in your head, you had like this built up thing. And then as you got older, you started to build back into this, you know, like being who you were and asking the kinds of questions and being the outspoken person that you'd always been like in your head.
Yeah, that's exactly, actually, I went through that same process too. And I guess, you know, you keep pushing till you get to that point where you're comfortable. I'd say things have also changed in the following way. There's a lot more mentorship and allyship that is now developed that helps a little bit drawing people out who are shy or not comfortable. So I'm hoping that we will see more of that resulting in better outcomes where people feel comfortable talking in even big groups and small groups. I mean, an example is at Cornell, we revisited, and this is again with our Women in Cornell Computing group, we revisited whether or not faculty call out students, and students ask questions in class. Do they try to make sure to always call on the women and the men and just make sure that both of them have an opportunity? And over time, this resulted in the women speaking up more, and then they feeling more comfortable with it, and just this becoming a normal thing. So it's one of those things, it can be done. If you're made aware of the issue, you then address it concretely in a classroom setting, and actually it results in better outcomes, and, you know, then people get used to it.
That's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like, you know, being involved in groups like the Women in Computer Science group at Cornell and others has been a big part of your work there, not just your research, but, you know, also being the chair of a whole department, and now, you know, also being a founder of a company, right? How do you manage to balance all of these different roles of mentor, professor, researcher, founder, etc.?
It's been very intense, that I have to admit. it feels like it's been sort of a continuous roller coaster ride for a long, like 5-year period, 6-year period, and even before that. But I actually love it. I mean, I do it because I love it. I really enjoy, and each one of them brings out sort of a different part of my brain, my, you know, skill set, my excitement. And so together, I feel like it results in the most sort of fulfilling experience for me, for my life. So I love being, the research for me is very important to continue, and I'll continue to do it going forward because it keeps me connected to the academic. I came into this job because I enjoy open-ended problems, and I really find that exciting. And, it makes me feel, happy to be alive kind of thing. So I have to keep the research alive. But on the other hand, things like being a chair, and I'll talk about entrepreneurship, but when I'm the chair, I get to help other students and I get to help the other faculty, and I mentor the junior faculty, and I enjoy that part too. And the entrepreneurship thing came very late in my life, actually. I didn't know I would become one. So I was an academic the whole way till 2015 when we launched Grokstyle. And I was due a sabbatical at that time. So I took my sabbatical, and I also took a leave of absence, and I spent 2 years at Grokstyle building up this company. And it was a blast. It was an eye-opening experience for me, to the point where I just can't imagine not having some sort of participation in entrepreneurial activities going forward. So it just it just changed, a certain part of my life where it turned on some switches that were off till then, and I really enjoyed it.
So it felt like it was a really natural transition for you, working on something that you love from a research perspective, and then all of a sudden like transitioning it out and figuring out how to commercialize it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit. So you said it was 2015 when you guys started Grokstyle, and you took a sabbatical to go start working on it. Was that when you started working with Sean Bell, or had you started working together before that?
So Sean Sean Bell was my co-founder in Grokstyle. He was my PhD student from, I'm trying to think, is it 2012 or 2011? So we had been working on research together. So we had a great rapport. That's why we got started, on the company together. Yeah. We've been working on research together the whole time, and working on different problems of what I call scene understanding. So if you have an image, as a human being, you look at an image and you can immediately understand what's in it. Here there's a headphones, there's a keyboard, and it's made of plastic, that's made of leather, or you get your idea of what you're seeing. This problem of scene understanding is a fundamental computer vision problem. And so we were working in different parts of it in our research. We were looking at material understanding, building data sets to build neural networks so that we can do a better job at it, et cetera. So while we were doing all that research, we were actually exploring a lot of, internet photo collections. So people would post images of different things. And as we were exploring them, we realized people were asking a lot of questions about each image. Oh, I wonder what this handbag is in this picture of a celebrity, or I wonder what the chandelier is in this picture of this house. And so that motivated our research. So we created Grokstyle to do this problem of visual recognition. Given a picture of some furniture, we can tell you not only that it's a chair, but it's the Eames chair, and where can you buy it? And so that was sort of the commercial idea that we explored. And so we started off the company based on that idea. We had a SIGGRAPH paper in 2015. Sean and I then founded the company. We came to LDV, the Vision Summit, and Sean presented our work, and this was just hot off the press. And then he won the it was a huge. It really made a big difference in our journey as a company to have that experience and that award. We then got a lead investor, Krishna Bharat, who was the founder of Google News, and Amit Singhal, who was actually running Google Search at that time. We got 2 lead investors. Red Bear Angels from Cornell joined, and together we got enough seed funding that we could, launch the company. We started off in Ithaca, then we moved over to San Francisco, and we built up a team of 10. And I'm trying to think, we had at some point 5 women in the, so it was a very balanced team, and of engineers, and we were building up this product.
That's exceptional. I remember actually looking at one of your photos on your website, and it was one of the first things that I had noticed. I was like, wow, that's really impressive to have like 50-50, and it's not like human resources, but it's actually the engineers on that side. And so you guys, it was very, very illuminating about the kinds of things that you're working on.
It was a lot of fun. The team was a blast. They're wonderful people. And so we're, planning a reunion soon, hopefully.
Oh, that's great. And so, you guys had a fantastic exit recently to Facebook, where they're now envisioning, the future of shopping, as they call it, based on your technology. you know, like, how does that make you feel to have like one of the largest tech companies in the world using and deploying your technology?
It's a blast. I mean, that's sort of what the reason we got into Grokstyle in the first place was we really were excited about it and wanted to see that impact. And in fact, that's one of the reasons when we started talking to Facebook, it made a lot of sense for us to get acquired by Facebook, because we thought Facebook was a perfect home for us to really push this technology out to have that impact. And so now, yes, billions, billions of users and images are using the core technology. It's now a GrokNet. It's a Grokstyle technology. It's called GrokNet within the context of Facebook. They built it out with a team of of engineers. They've got a whole, it works for the full stack of images. And it's super exciting to see it deployed. It's been, it's really, you dreamed that is how it would play out, but it's nice that it actually did. So it's just been a lot of fun. And the teams are very happy.
It's not the first time that you've seen some of your research or some of your work end up on a major mainstream tech company, because Autodesk's cloud renderer is based on some work that you did before as well, right?
So that's right. Yeah, that was a very different path. But it was also, yes, it's true that we got our technology adopted. So this was work that I did about in the 2005 to 2008 range. It was work called Light Cuts with my collaborator, Bruce Walter, and a bunch of other great collaborators at Cornell. And we're looking at the problem of producing images that look real. One of the big problems with that is how do you capture all the physics. Light bounces around. How do you do that in an efficient way? So Light Cuts was this efficient rendering algorithm, and Autodesk adopted it for their cloud renderer because when you have massive amounts of sort of requests, they wanted to use this sort of scalable solution to rendering it. And but that we published our paper year after year, and the company looked at it and adopted it into their pipeline. So while it was our technology, we didn't play such a visceral role in actually getting it out there and working with the engineers, but it was a lot of fun too, because we would talk to them, learn about the new problems they were seeing when you actually apply, in all of academic research, when you go and you actually apply it in an industry setting, turns out, well, it did in 80% of the cases, 90, but then what about the remaining stuff that you still have to get right? So you get very inspired with new problems when you work with industry. So that both in Grokstyle and in the Light Cuts work, we really had the benefit of working with industry to help us actually
That's
define some of
great.
the problems.
So do you think that that's one of the biggest differences that you found between academic research and then doing it as a company is just those touch points with real industry players in order to understand some of their real needs?
Yeah, that is the biggest part of it. You work in, it's easy, well, not easy, but it's different. When you're sitting in an academic setting, when you're faced with a problem, you kind of have to make some decisions on how to simplify the problem. Yeah. And if you don't understand what's important in industry, you might simplify it the wrong way. You might throw away the important piece of it that needs to be solved and solve sort of the easy part, or the part that nobody actually is ever going to use. Yeah. So that's where that connection with industry is critical to drive it in the direction of solving sort of the real problem, so to speak, which I think is that's why it's so rewarding to be able to work with industry partners.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I know that you were working on an algorithm to predict fashion trends, right? Are you still working on that project at the moment? And if you are you working on it, do you have any industry collaborators that you're relying upon in order to help facilitate that?
Yeah. So that's also a very fun project, and that's an ongoing project in my group. So yes, I am working on it and will continue working on it. It started off with Kevin Madsen and Noah Snavely. Noah is a professor also at Cornell, but in Cornell Tech. Kevin now is at Facebook. And then we have Bharat Hariharan, is a faculty member at Cornell, and Utkarsh Mal, who's my PhD student, who's actively working on it now. So when we first started, the project was called Street Style. And now we had a paper in ICCV last year called GeoStyle. And the core idea was, take lots of images. In this case, we got images that were public at that time on Instagram, and try to understand how people around the world dress. And it turns out it also piqued the interest of cultural anthropologists we're working with. So they're very interested. If you're a cultural anthropologist, the way you solve this problem right now of trying to understand how people dress across the world is you get a field study, you go to different parts of the world, you interview 10, 20 people, you try to compile all of that into some knowledge. So when we showed up and said, here's an automated tool, taking Instagram images, you can sit at home and you can just sort of browse the dressing patterns of different parts of the world at different times. They were blown away. So we got Denise Green from our apparel design part of Cornell, and we're working with her on sort of understanding cultural implications of fashion trends. So this project, so these are the people, and we have started to look at the following problems. When you have all of this data, can you understand when something suddenly becomes very exciting or interesting to people, like a fashion trend, everybody starts wearing it and then it drops off, say. What we found while we were running this, so we discovered all kinds of interesting fashion trends. We find a sudden peak around World Cup soccer. So everybody started wearing the yellow jerseys with the V-neck, and you can just see it right in the images. When you look at all the images, everybody's wearing that, and it's particularly in certain parts of the world. But we would also,
so can you see when it's like wedding season in India, for instance, like all of a sudden everybody goes from shalwar kameez to saris?
Exactly. So we found so in fact, we have a whole map of the world of the most salient big events that jumped out. There's Durga Puja, which is one thing in Calcutta, where there's this particular festival. Everybody's got their bright saris on and their gold jewelry on. That's one. We got Fashion Week in Paris. We found, the Stanley Cup. So sporting events, fashion events, all just pop right out of this analysis. And political rallies. So the other thing we found is we were just exploring, this was, the data completely not knowing what we'll find. And we found the Catalan Way, there was a big protest in Spain, and everybody wore yellow shirts and formed a human chain. And again, just by analyzing the pictures, we saw a sudden big spike in this. You go and you look at it and you see, well, there's a political rally. So it's just been eye-opening because you learn about sort of the human state across the planet just by looking at the images they're posting.
That's super interesting. I wonder if if it could ultimately be applied to something like war too, and escalation, right? So if all of a sudden there's a lot more military fatigues showing up in all of these images in certain areas of the world, you can see where something is happening from a wartime perspective.
That's a great point. That is, in fact, one use. The other thing, we're actually applying these technologies for satellite imagery, and we're working with crop scientists in this case to understand how the ecosystem has changed in a positive way, negative way. What are the kinds of trends you're seeing there? So yeah, there are all these amazing uses which come from basically treating the vision piece as sort of a it's like a tool, right? It's now I have my telescope, I have my microscope, I can understand what the world is doing. Can I now go beyond that and just learn something new?
Very neat. So as Dean, are you going to have the opportunity to continue your research?
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to in your new role.
So great questions. I really hope so. And as I said, for me, research is a fundamental aspect of both my intellectual sort of joy, but also the engagement of my entire community. We are researchers. That's the people I represent. So doing what all of my people do is actually important for me to appreciate sort of the world as it's changing, etc. So I do see myself as continuing to do my research. In my researcher role, I'm looking, I think these large scale vision problems are going to be super exciting. Yeah. In my dean role, I've been increasingly, I told you I was very interested in sort of law and social issues early on. Mm-hmm. One of the things that, as technology is just going far outstripping our ability to guess how it's going to play out. Mm-hmm. There's lots of interesting questions that are coming up in the context of, societal implications of things. And so this particular deanship, I'm Dean of Computing and Information Science, is really about, we have computer science, information science, and data science, stats and data science, all in the same unit. And all of the people in this group are actually looking at societal implications, large scale data, and what are the implications of that. So I'm very excited about actually continuing to foster that kind of research and promote it and help it succeed.
That's great. We talked a little bit about what inspires you the most, right? But it's like working with people and helping them facilitate their research as well as doing your own is a big part of why you're most excited about this. Is there, do you see any opportunities for crossover in all these different sectors that you're looking at? So whether that's the data science side of things or otherwise? How can they cross over and work together in order to get more information or better trends?
Yeah, so all of these, I actually think the most exciting areas and all of these projects that are end up really taking off are fundamentally interdisciplinary. So it's just like I'm working with the cultural anthropologists and we're doing the research together because they come and they ask us questions that we didn't think just like I told you with industry, they make us look at different parts of the problem. When you work with the domain expert, they explain to you which are the questions that are actually interesting and which are, it's okay, you can build a tool, but we don't care about that part. So I've worked with cultural anthropologists with the crop, with the satellite imaging.
Now.
We're working with crop scientists, etc. So I think working with the domain experts is critical for this technology to really have that impact. So that I think is a given, that there will be crossover in both sides.
Well, it sounds like it's such a great opportunity, like at Cornell, for instance, where you guys have so many fantastic different schools, whether that's the agricultural school or that's the, any of the schools that you guys are working with, that there's so many different opportunities to do interdisciplinary research.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think I feel very fortunate actually. It's the way we are structured. There's two parts of it. Firstly, it's a full, it's a very broad school. It covers everything. Exactly as you said, we have, because we have a land grant mission, we have the whole agriculture side, we have a vet school, we have everything. And so we have people who are working with the vet school on computer vision issues, for vision problems, for example. So there's a full range. And I think Cornell has a particular, maybe because of the way it was built, maybe because it's in upstate New York. When it first started, now there's Cornell Tech, of course, in New York City. The culture is to be very collaborative. The culture is people talk to people from other areas all the time because you're in this town and you bump into people in, the playground, in the coffee shops, and then you just naturally talk to people about broader problems than just the ones you're looking at, which is what I really love about being part of sort of a university town.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think I read something one time that Ithaca has more PhDs per capita out of any other city in the entire US. So I can definitely understand how
that doesn't surprise me.
So looking across all of these different areas and all of your colleagues who are working on momentous things, what industries do you think are going to be reshaped by visual technologies in the coming years?
So, I mean, there's the obvious one, but I think its impact is going to become more and more realized is robotics. I mean, robotics and the biggest thing that I'm getting very excited about, there's of course autonomous vehicles, etc. But for me, robotics for home care and elder care, it's been around the corner. We've been talking about it for a long time, but for health and for elder care and that's personal robots, that part is really going to take off and it's going to be exciting and wonderful.
Do you see that as being more on like the cobot side of things where they can be companions for people, or do you see them more on the care side of things where they can actually assist them in doing different things in order to, let's say, like age in place more, as they say, or stay out of these nursing homes, which we now know are kind of a hotbed from a pandemic perspective?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the latter. I actually think both of them will grow because once this technology grows, the kinds of core technologies underneath that drive them will, it's a rising tide that'll raise all boats. But I am very excited about, exactly, the helping in place so that, because that's naturally the way we need to go actually as a society. So I think that's an incredible growth area.
That's great. And what about the agriculture side of things? I know that you've worked on it a little bit, but we're in the midst of working on our third annual Insights report, where we do a deep dive into an industry that's ripe for disruption via visual technologies. And this year we're looking at food and agriculture. So things like satellite imaging and then the computer vision in order to analyze it is a big part of this and understanding how the trends are going to go on it, but there's so many other aspects of ag.
That is definitely true. And I kind of assumed that ag was a given in your list. Yes, absolutely. I think there are and actually new kinds of robots, right? So a lot of, the existing industrial robot setting now getting into much more in the wild, messy situations, being able to deal with things that in the past have always been associated with a human being going there and doing it, is definitely, that's also right on the threshold. And hopefully we'll get there. Yeah, it'll be super exciting.
You know, it's interesting. One of the things that like we've kind of been debating or going back and forth on a little bit is we think that perception and vision has really been the big game changer for robotics, because you don't have to have a specially designed, warehouse, let's say, for a robot to be able to come in and move about it alongside humans in a safe fashion, to pick up boxes, move things, pack items, etc. But one of the things is that in agriculture, it doesn't seem to necessarily be moving in the same way at the moment. It still seems to be a lot of like stationary robotics, where the robots are actually built for the specific use case.
Right.
Are you finding the same kind of thing?
So I'm seeing great people, and actually Kristen Peterson, who's in Cornell in the electrical engineering department, you should really talk to her. She's working on sort of building these robots that can grab soft fruit and deal with all of the messiness of if you want to get a ripe peach off the tree, what's it going to take? And that is a huge, right? So every aspect of it, the grasp, the control, every aspect of it is interesting. So you should definitely talk to her at some point. But I think that's where a lot of the growth is. It's not the big industrial ones, but also these smaller ones. They're supposed to go under the water, under the plants and monitor health, etc. automatically, and also help with picking and managing of it.
Oh, for sure. And then the use cases for hyperspectral imaging and these kinds of things are really phenomenal in the space. It's so interesting. That's really neat. Do you have any advice for other researchers or professors who are interested in commercializing their research? What could inspire them to finally take that next step out of academia and to build it into a business the way that you and Sean did with Grokstyle?
Yeah, so I think I had it was an incredible experience, and it remains, I'm still living, I still work on areas of research related to this. What I guess, how would you go about doing it? It is a big transition. So one thing is, if you've had an academic life, first thinking about the problem much more the people are always talking to you about product market fit. But pick a problem that you can see there's a real need for. I think that is one of the most important things to do. And then I think, typically researchers have an incredible solution that they can bring to bear. And then enjoy every aspect of it. For me, one of the things, and some researchers are not comfortable with that, so they should walk in with their eyes open. You need to do everything when you're building a company, right? Ground up. You need to do the finances, you need to do the business plan, you need to think about the product, you need to think about the technology and all of those pieces. Yeah. I found that really exciting, like to be able to expand the full range. It's a very, you have to become the jack of all trades on everything. And that's a lot of fun. So I strongly recommend that. And if they don't feel like they want to do every part of it, then get two people, co-found a company together where you have complementary skills. And it's just well worth it. Yeah. And enjoy the highs and the lows. I think there are always both of them, and it's important to learn to enjoy them both.
That's great. Yeah, one of the things, my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned his own business. And one of the things that he always said to my sisters and I when we were thinking about, different opportunities and stuff, and he's like, never start up your own business unless you're willing to sweep the floors. And that's like one of the things that I always play over in my mind is like, you have to be willing to even, clean the toilet and sweep the floors when you're getting into this. And so it is a different type of setting, but there's so much benefit to bringing it to market.
But that's exactly right. I think, this idea that, I'm an expert in X, so I'm going to only do X, is just not acceptable in a startup. You have to go do the thing that you're not an expert in and figure it out. And I found that incredibly exciting.
The joys of it, right? And continued learning.
I found it very exciting. It really, it expands your thinking. You don't get into a narrow box. It really forces you to expand your thinking.
That's fantastic. So I think I know the answer to this one already, but it's one that I close out all of our interviews with, which is, if computers didn't exist, what would your career choice have been?
Wait, it's interesting. You think you know my answer, so you should tell me.
I thought, I was like, oh, maybe she'd end up being a dancer.
Yes, that was true. Now, if I had thought about it, that's true. That would have been, if computers didn't exist at that stage, yes. But I also, one thing that I always was very interested in, I got into computer vision for that reason and graphics, very interested in human perception. So I might have become sort of more of a perception psychologist or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
That would have been a lot of fun because I'm really intrigued. Without computers, there's still the question of how do we understand the world. That problem remains, irrespective of whether you have a neural architecture to try to solve the problem.
So true. And if you figure it out, please let me know.
That's what I like about it, is completely open-ended. So it'll stay that way for a long time.
That's exciting. Well, thank you again for taking the time to chat. It's been a real pleasure learning about your journey as an entrepreneur, as an academic, a researcher, professor, chair of your department, and now dean of Cornell in the computer science department. I'm so excited for you. It's wonderful to talk. And we look forward to continuing our conversations in the future.